Hi. I'm Tae'lur Alexis. I'm a front-end engineer as well as the founder of CodeEverydayIO, and I'm going to give a presentation on building accessible UI with React. So this is what we will be talking about today a little bit, is what is accessibility. I'll kind of like give you like a brief like overview of like accessibility as far as like different assistive technologies and ways to like test your React application for like accessibility and everything. I'm also going to talk about how to get involved in accessibility. So I wanted to kind of add like a community aspect to it, because how I found out about accessibility is through that. And so yeah, let's start. So what exactly is accessibility, or A11Y? So some people don't know that it's an acronym that it stands for accessibility. And the 11 stands for like how many like letters like in between like the letter A and Y for accessibility. Yeah. Yeah, I just found that out fairly recently. And accessibility is basically ensuring that your application is able for users who are impaired or who have disabilities to be able to like successfully like navigate your application. And so I actually like came across accessibility from Marcy Sutton, if you've heard of her. She is an engineer, and she's actually the head of learning at Gatsby JS right now. And so I had met her at Cascadia JS and like last year in Seattle. And she actually was the first person that I ever met that was that specialized like in accessibility. I didn't know what it was. When I was like learning how to code, I guess like accessibility like wasn't like stressed enough to like learn or anything. And so she kind of just like her overall like energy and like her passion about accessibility kind of like got me excited to like want to like learn like more about it. And I've always, you know, been very like compassionate, and I've always like wanted to build things for people, and I don't want to ever neglect anyone from being able to like use like whatever I create, because then that would defeat the purpose of me as an engineer. And yeah, so React in specific fully supports building an accessible UI, and so we'll kind of get into that. For right now, I kind of wanted to go through like the acronym breakdowns, because like in like the accessibility community, especially like online, they use a lot of these like acronyms, but like not everyone like knows what they mean, and I feel like that defeats the purpose of it. So a few I've already explained. The A11Y, ADA stands for Americans with Disabilities Act. AT stands for Assistive Technology. And then I18M, that stands for instrumentalization. And so that's basically ensures that your applications are tailored based on like cultures and like languages. So like for an example, like Vue.js, their documentation is translated into different languages. And so that helps like developers, you know, helps like I guess like decrease like cultural barriers, so that everyone is like able to like learn the documentation and be able to like contribute to it and improve the open source framework and everything. And it's used like in like websites, like how you make like in the corners of like a website, you'll see like different like flags. And so that's basically like tailoring like the content of like a web page to like whatever like country or like language. So yeah, let's go into this. Examples. So quick like disclaimer. Before I came to like this like conference today, my slides are like all like deleted like by accident, and so like I literally like wrote these like back up like from memory like in 5 minutes like on the way here. So bear with me. I didn't get to finish like everything. But the slides will like the full slides and like all the resources and everything will be like uploaded on my GitHub. So then you guys can kind of check it out and everything. So yeah, I won't leave you guys hanging. Yeah, so a couple examples of like assistive technology, which is just a reminder, is just different technologies that people with disabilities like use to like navigate a web page. are like speech to text technologies, and then as well as screen readers. So yeah, and accessibility is not an afterthought. I wanted to include this because a lot of developers seem to have this like notion that they should just code with themselves in mind, not for other people in mind, if that makes sense. People often like underestimate the power of accessibility and like why it should be like used and why we should like start to like question like how we as engineers code and how we think about code before we actually code. And so accessibility, for me, like the reason like why I'm even speaking about it and why I've become very passionate about it is because I myself have like a disability. It's a temporary disability. Like I can't see. My vision is like really, really bad. Like right now, just so you like all can like kind of like understand like what I'm going through right now. I can't see any of these words like at all. I can only see like here. And it's been like that for like months and it's getting worse, but that's the reason why accessibility is like really important to me. And I'm an engineer just like many of you. And so the tools that we build and everything, like we have to like make sure that we practice coding with like empathy. And so yeah. Why is it important? There are 1.2 billion users worldwide who are disabled, a variety of disabilities, color blindness, being actually blind. There's a bunch of impairments. And so yeah, web content accessibility guidelines. That is a standard that is like often used that you can like check out to like basically make sure that you are like coding with accessibility. It gives you like a checklist and guidelines to follow. They're pretty thorough with it. And then web accessibility and the law. So I kind of, as I was like researching like more about accessibility like for this talk, I wanted to kind of know about the legal ramifications because like I've seen accessibility like, in the headlines. Like you may have seen like Beyonce being sued for accessibility for her site not being accessible. And so it kind of like got me like interested in like learning more about it. So technically the only websites that are like legally supposed to be accessible are like federal and government and local websites. Like non-government websites are still considered like public like entities, and so like you're still subject to being like sued for that, but it's not always like held up in court as opposed to like the government website. So yeah. All right, so a brief overview of the 811 checklist. Okay, so this is where my eyesight. Do you mind if I read it off my phone? Okay, thank you. Let me see. All right. So like using plain language and avoiding figures of speech. You never know. Sometimes like we can, even like as little as like sarcasm, when you're like texting or like tweeting or something like that, some people may not be able to understand like certain jokes that you make because of like cultural barriers or like they're not being exposed to like that type of like joke or anything like that. So just like making sure like that you're just being like compassionate with the content that you create, and then writing content at an 8th grade reading level, making sure that the HTML elements, a button and label content is descriptive, and then enable viewport zoom, like increasing the size of the text, which is like really, really important. Like on Medium, how like you can like kind of like zoom in. That's like really, really important for me as someone who has like vision issues. And then using like the lang attribute, which helps screen readers to pronounce content correctly. That's also really important. All right, so questions to ask yourself. Is every image element an alt attribute, and then also increasing text size to 200%. Did you add horizontal scrolling? Not everyone likes the horizontal scroll. And it's just like kind of like an annoyance for everyone, really, it seems. And then can the site be rotated to any orientation? That as well. So just questions like keep in mind when you are building your like next application. All right. So an ode to color contrast, which is something that is really, really important. How legible colors are when placed next to and on top of each other. And just like reiterating, like you should design with inclusion and accessibility before you code. And it makes it easier to design with accessibility like first instead of like going over like afterwards. And then it's also recommended you have a color contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1. All right. Now let's get into React accessibility, since I kind of wanted to go over like the overview of like basic web accessibility. All right. So the core of a accessible React application actually lies in HTML, making sure that you are writing semantic HTML, and then also keyword focus, making sure that you can tab through like the input fields and everything. That's also something like that I've had to do in my field of work as a front-end developer when it comes to like testing, just like basic testing. Like, can you like tab through like your like input forms and everything? And then also ARIA HTML fully supported by JSX. That helps impaired users navigate through your site with assistive technology. So that's another way that React has accessibility support. All right, so tools, libraries, and packages to install. This was my favorite part. And actually in the GitHub repo that I'm actually putting up like after this talk, I have about like 100 resources that I have found that you can all just kind of like scroll through, and I included like little like descriptions so you don't have to just like click through like every resource and find out like what it's about, because I would hate that. React's A11Y. It's deprecated now, but at the time you were able to, it was a package that allows you to like identify accessibility issues in your React element. So it would, like as you like, once you like, I guess you import the model into your application, and then when you like run the code, like the warnings will pop up in the Chrome DevTool console. And now that's been replaced by React X. And that is actually a tool that Marcy Sutton, the woman that inspired me to like get into accessibility, that's what she was working on. So that's pretty cool. That's accessibility auditing for React.js applications. The results again show in the Chrome DevTools, and it's being like actively supported, which is like really important to like note, because as an engineer, we're always like looking for like tools that are being constantly like updated and everything, and like always like, you know, being like used, and has like community support and everything. And React X is being worked on, and it's being like maintained actively. Yeah, you can like learn more on their GitHub and everything. All right. So then we also have ESLint plugin JSX, and that plugin again just is another way for you to like audit and check for accessibility in your code. So yeah, and then Create React App. I found out fairly recently actually has this like built in. So yeah, and let me see. I also wanted to kind of shout out like Gatsby. They actually have a commitment to accessibility, which makes sense since Marcy's on there. Yeah, so it has like out-of-the-box support. They use Reach Router, which is like React Router, but except it's more accessible. And they coded with like more accessibility in mind. And it's actually 70% smaller bundle size than React Router, which is often used, but I think Reach Router is being like used for. And then Gatsby's like link component wraps reach router's link component by default. So yeah. And then the GitHub repository, you can follow it at github.com. I have a typo in my my slide. I'm sorry. Yeah, you can follow it at github.com/cyberbarbie/react-accessibility. Yeah. And then now I want to get into how to get involved in the accessibility community. This is my favorite part that I don't have to read off of. You can actually follow like the ALI project or A11Y project, and that actually provides like a list of resources, like everything to do with accessibility, people to follow, like a comprehensive list of people to follow and everything. For me, I've also learned like more about accessibility through like refactoring and like working on my existing applications, going through like old code and then try to make it like more accessible. So that's an easy way for you to kind of get started. There's a bunch of resources, and like I said in my repo, like I'll have the resources like kind of like broken down for you. And also contributing to like open source, like that's really, really important. So if you have like a favorite framework or library she likes to use, like Gatsby or something, they often have accessibility issues that are like needed. React Native has a lot of accessibility issues that needs to be like resolved. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, just content creating as well. That's the way to kind of spread the word about accessibility, is through like writing tutorials, doing conference or meetup talks and everything. And you don't have to be an expert. I don't know the level of expertise of any of you, but you know, you can always like learn by sharing, and then through sharing, you kind of gain like more like expertise because you get feedback and constructive criticism, and it makes you better. So that's another way to kind of also spread the word about accessibility. And who to follow. So these aren't like my top 3 or anything like that. It's not like I wasn't trying to like omit anyone from this. But these are the few of the people who really, really like helped me. And they often make like a lot of posts on like social media. Twitter, for example, Marcia Sutton, Tatiana D. Max, she's an inclusion and accessibility designer. And then EJ Mason, he is really, really thorough with his like research and his findings on accessibility. So he's someone to definitely follow. And yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. And you can also follow Code Every Day, which is a platform that I'm building to help people transitioning to tech with interview prep, resources, and mentorship. So, yeah.